and welcome to the League of Women Voters webinar on our comments, League of Women Voters Upper Mississippi River Region comments to US EPA relative to proposed changes to the waters of the US definition. This is a very important topic, and tonight we're going to talk about the content of our comments, but we're also going to talk about the context of this and why the Clean Water Act is so important and all that kind of stuff. So I'll kind of swing into it. I'm Gretchen Sable. I'm the Communications Director for LWV Upper Mississippi River Region. In my past life, I worked for the Pollution Control Agency and the US EPA in the water programs, and so this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I've been with LWV UMR since it started in 2015, and it's been a wonderful course for me, so thank you. Also speaking tonight will be Sheila Wegman, and she'll introduce herself, and Mickey Croyle. Sheila is from Minneapolis and Mickey from St. Louis. We're all members of the LWV Upper Mississippi River Region Action Committee, and we meet monthly, and what we do is we talk about things that need action, and we do what we can to affect change. So this letter is an example of that. So I'm going to plow in here. I'll talk a little bit about my story with the Clean Water Act. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. I was born in 1953, and at that time, my parents taught me not to go into the streams because that's where sewage goes. Our air was filthy with fly ash from the power plant down the hill, and I didn't know any different. It wasn't until I was in 5th grade that I went into a cleaner environment, and we found things living in the streams, and it was amazing. And so that was my kind of awakening to, this isn't right, what I was seeing. And then there were a lot of changes. So in Western Pennsylvania and all of Pennsylvania, there were state laws that began to address the horrible pollution that we had there. And then that was eventually bolstered in '72 by the Clean Water Act. And so now when I go back to Pennsylvania, things are clean. People are catching fish in the rivers that nobody thought we would find game fish like that, something besides catfish. And the air is clean. The air has been clean forever. And part of that was because industry went down, but a lot of it's because of laws that required change. Also in my personal life, my parents were on the town board and on the sewage board. And so when sewers came to our area, it was very controversial and divisive. And my family fought for that. I remember my mom was the person collecting the checks from these angry guys that got out of the mill and came to pay their checks. And she made my brother or I sit in the living room because people would yell at her less if the kids were there. So we were kind of my mother's human shield for doing that. So it was just something that was ingrained from a long time. My grandfather, we always said he had his own sewage treatment plant. He was the head of the sewer authority. And so we'd always go see Grandpa's sewage treatment plant when we were back. And it was just, I grew up that way, and I worked in sewage and I worked in feedlots. And so it's all come together for me in this. And so now when I see these proposed changes to the Clean Water Act, it strikes me deeply in my heart. And I don't want to see us going back. And so that's why this mattered so much to me, and why I suggested that we need to take strong action. And so fortunately, we're lucky to have a great crew here. I'll toss it off to Sheila here, and she can tell us about herself and kind of go through the letter, and then Mickey can do the same when her time comes. And maybe Sheila will share her Clean Water Act story too.
I'm Sheila Wigman, and so my Clean Water Act story, it's hard to, your life, it goes so fast, but there's so many memories. I do remember as a little girl, used to worry about waste for some reason and worry about the fate of the world. But I also had a lot of fun camping and Girl Scouts and with my family. Probably and I did have a sense of wanting to do something. I was always, especially with Girl Scouts, I really was concerned about nature. But when I was in high school, we moved. We had been from Minnesota, but we were living in Northern Virginia. My senior year was in the middle of the environmental movement, and we had an environmental club. And because we were so close to Washington, D.C., we were able to go to the first Earth Day. And that was life-changing. It was bands and protesting and just inspirational for young people. And I went off to college the next year back to Minnesota, and got my education in biology and civil engineering and my goal was to work for the EPA, which I eventually was able to do, and was there for I don't know, my EPA tenure is about 20 years. I did work a little while in Minnesota for our county here, but uh, when I worked for EPA, I was in San Francisco for about 6 years in the territory of American Samoa, also for about 15. And I was involved with water programs all of the time. Is similar to Gretchen. I was an inspector. I was involved in almost every single program in American Samoa as uh, the only professional most of the time. And it was like all of it is a life-changing experience, and it just still brings me a lot of joy. And when I think about that, now retired, but I also eventually got another profession. And these days, have been able to do environmental advocacy ever since not working at EPA, and that's about 15 years, and it's really made a difference. I'm now on the UMR, and have been a League of Women Voters member for a while, and it's an incredible experience, especially as a large group with a very, very involved and very involved advocates. So I appreciate the opportunity. I do have a PowerPoint presentation today on uh, and this goes through as Gretchen said, the contents of let's see. So my discussion is again, it's about the proposed 2025 WOTUS rule, threats and action needed for the Upper Mississippi River region, which we call UMR, which I might do throughout this presentation. First, oops. First, I'm gonna talk about the goals for the presentation. I'm going to go into what is the SACA decision, and the proposed everybody's in the way of my slide. Anyway, I'm going to go into the EPA rule and what are the contents. I'm going to talk about the implications for the UMR. We have 5 states: Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, and Wisconsin. And then what are the alternatives to the proposed WOTUS rule? We were in the instructions for submitting comments. They asked, "What are alternatives?" And so we did our best to find some alternatives. First, I'm going to talk about the SACA decision and WOTUS. Um, the SACA decision uh, came down in 2023. They reviewed the definition of the waters of the United States based on the Clean Water Act and the use at the time, and they found that the WOTUS rule was too broad, vague, and it went beyond the authority granted by the original Clean Water Act. They found lack of clear language in the Clean Water Act on scope and the mandate of EPA in implementing WOTUS. They found something called the 2015 Nexus approach found to be inconsistent with the Clean Water text and structure. The Nexus approach has been used. It was actually a Supreme Court justice that developed this, not an engineer or a biologist, and it was used to protect physical and chemical and biological integrity of waters, which was mandated in the Clean Water Act, and that was all waters of any sort at the time in the 1972, and also connectivity. The second decision talked about the lack of a traditional balance between federal and state power, and especially with regard to private property. That's where SACIT came from. And then I'll tell you a little bit about that in a sec here. And also the decision included that it was a source of regulatory uncertainty for landowners. SACIT originally was a landowner, a couple in someplace in Idaho who bought some land with a wetland and filled it. And the EPA, my mother actually used to work at the EPA in Idaho, but the EPA there issued a enforcement order against them, and that was in 20 like 7, And they were in court litigating for years. It was the EPA rule was EPA side of things was upheld for two levels, and when they got to the Supreme Court, the EPA was not supported. And that was the result. This is the result of that right now. I don't know if they've unfilled their wetland or not. So next, I'm going to talk about key revisions to the WOTUS definitions and exclusions. First, the original definition of waters of the United States in the Clean Water Act was all waters. So it's been negotiated over the years, and now somewhat through the courts too, a lot of court cases. Anyway, but the definitions included here, one is the definition of relatively permanent waters. Permanence is discussed a lot based on WOTUS. That is surface water that is standing and continuously flowing. They talk about continuous surface connection. In particular, for wetlands, they must physically touch a regulated water body to qualify for jurisdiction or to be regulated. And then tributaries also must connect to a navigable water body directly or through other connected features. And then those are the main definitions. The exclusions are really mostly based on their ability to connect physically to other waters. So the first exclusion are ephemeral streams, which is streams with only short-term flow from rain and snowmelt. Intermittent streams also are eliminated, mostly if they have no consistent flow through the defined wet season. And that is clearly different all through the country, and they're still working on how to figure that out. These kind of streams rely only on groundwater and rain. That's their source of flow. Interstate lakes or ponds and interstate waters are also excluded. Otherwise, unless they are jurisdictional, meaning they meet the WOTUS criteria that we're discussing today. Groundwater is been excluded originally since the Clean Water Act was passed, but is now written down somewhere that it's not excluded. Some waste treatment systems are excluded. These include lagoons, treatment ponds, and detention basins, and they're mostly seen in agriculture. The last exclusion, well, actually, there's two more exclusions. Another exclusion is prior converted farmland. This was land that was converted to farmland before December 23, 1985, and used for agriculture. Any waters or whatever on their lands, and then ditches. These are excavated areas that are on dry land and only drain through dry land. One of the concerns we have for the WOTUS rule is that it fails to rely on connectivity and negate some ecosystem function. It only recognizes physical connectivity, but in hydrologic systems, both chemical and biological connectivity is important, and these are ignored. It fails to protect the physical, chemical, and biological integrity of waters, which is a mandate of the Clean Water Act. So it's hard to figure out how a court could think something was copacetic with a federal act. Anyway, it removes water bodies that play roles in filtering pollutants, aquifer recharge, flood control, diversity, and other functions which continue to be a concern. I have a few more things the rule fails where the rule fails to rely on connectivity and ecosystem function. So again, even without physical connection, there's some professors from Harvard, I believe, that put this forward. These waters these removed waters have a function in the hydrologic system, especially ephemeral streams and intermittent streams. They are natural buffers to prevent flooding. The proposed definition of WOTUS focuses on permanence, as I probably already said, but in particular, it's waters that can be seen with the naked eyes of a farmer or a developer. Um, and the last failing is that we now have potential downstream water pollution from upstream state waters that previously relied on federal protection. So once WOTUS is implemented, there'll be a lot of parts of the United States that have no protection of waters. Um, and one of the impacts that we see of this is in the Gulf of America. And I have a map showing the oxygen levels. It's a NOAA map. It's from early, it's from a little while ago, but you still get the point. You can see the Gulf of America from Texas to Louisiana, and that red is dissolved oxygen levels that are zero. So this is all close to the land, so you can see where the Mississippi is flowing and bringing our waters down from upper Mississippi River Basin, and all along the way, in particular agricultural waters that suck the oxygen out of the water, so we have poor water quality, poor feeding areas for fish. It affects the fisheries and obviously recreation, and also the habitat available for tourism, and just a big loss. And I think that the new WOTUS won't help this at all. Um, so now I'm going to talk about the impact on a variety of parts of the environment uh, that WOTUS is going to impact. First are wetlands quantity loss. They predict, the EPA and Army Corps predict up to 80% of current wetlands will lose federal protection, with significant losses in across the U.S. And now with the new WOTUS, the U.S. and UMR will also have more losses. At this point, we've already had significant losses in the U.S. and UMR since original times, and 43 to 89% of the original wetlands have been lost. The next slide shows the numbers, and looks like you can see it's kind of hard just to focus on numbers, but it shows us that you can see that 3 states. Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri have lost. Some are close to 85 to 90% of their original wetlands, and that's really something. I mean, that tells us. I mean, certainly they were important, but we would hope to not lose more. Minnesota and Wisconsin have some pretty good programs, I think, that have helped, but they've also lost nearly half of their wetlands, and they as we're talking, I mean, there's important functions. Um, we've already documented water quality is down, and we have an aging infrastructure that cannot handle the additional demand for treatment that more pollution will generate. Drinking water contamination, again, is another concern. There will be fewer smaller water bodies and wetlands that act as critical filters for drinking water sources. That's important. Those sources are important. And then upland tributaries and headwaters will be less able to protect downstream waters. Again, part of the sources. Um, we are also concerned about habitats and biota. And there is this. I'm only giving you a snapshot here because there's lots more description in our comments. But uh, as far as habitats and biota, we will be losing diverse wetland habitat. Ephemeral and intermittent streams are critical to breeding, stopover of migratory birds, and nurseries for many species. Um, it seems like most of the United States has some type of extreme weather impact, but with UMR, we've already have more tornadoes, flooding, droughts, fires, and extreme storms. Um, and if we lose more wetlands, that will impact. We'll have less for mitigation, and also with increased storm and flood intensity, we need those wetlands for mitigation, for uh, uh, you know flood control, as well as for storage of water from flooding. Um, Another concern is geologic complexity of our area. We have karst topography in various parts of the Ummer area, and that is dissolution of solid rocks in the bedrock, like limestone. And in this, when this happens, water can move rapidly and uncontrollably through the bedrock, causing surface collapse and a decrease in aquifer recharge as just some of the impacts. We have agricultural concerns with the increased pollution in general, but also with the change in the waste treatment systems. When we have less regulation of the treatment systems, they probably won't even pay attention to them, or will they work? And that can increase damage to water quality, and especially we have concerns in the karst area. Mining pressure is now we are now uh, the federal government is pushing for mining, and with weakened permitting, and an increased push for mining, we'll probably have, and no permits at times, disposal of mining waste and byproducts in our waterways and wherever. And I in Minnesota where I am, you can the dealing with lots of metals in northern Minnesota is a constant battle. Um, as everyone has heard, that we've got data centers coming right and left. They have a high water demand with toxic chemicals in their wastewater. They're using PFAS in the cooling systems, and most states have no authority to regulate data centers. Um, with fewer federal requirements for permits, they're going to have shorter timelines and less cost. So that's an initiative. And then with the government is pushing for build out via executive order, and EPA has, Gretchen's and my old homes is now decreasing regulatory burden for the new chemicals used in data centers, like the PFAS and whatever else. There's a bunch of others. Um, and then lastly, when I'm looking at impacts, one of those important ones is the loss of federal protection in the states that rely on the feds for water protection. Um, and this is about half the states in the United States, and that will no longer have this. Then that means they will essentially have no protection. Um, Umber states like Iowa and Missouri, as we talked about, have no state wetlands protection, and Illinois has protections for wetlands on private land. Um, so states without protections have increased risk of pollution and impacts to all waters, and especially drinking water sources in upstream states can more easily contaminate the downstream states. It's kind of painful to contemplate this. It's almost like the last 50 years of some of our work is mute. So lastly, I'm going to talk about the alternatives regarding the proposed WOTUS rule. And um, we focus on asking Congress to amend the Clean Water Act. And firstly, we'd like a statutory definition that explicitly includes waters based on their physical, chemical, and biological connection to navigable waters, regardless of any connection to any surface water connection. We would like to see legislation that clarifies that EPA and the Army Corps have discretion to use the best available scientific method, including on connectivity of waters that are not permanent, and 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 it will better specify the jurisdiction of uh, what the agencies can do, rather than leaving it to the courts. If it was codified in a law, there'd be less of this discussion as we've gone through over the last probably 20 years of changing the definition of WOTUS. Um, Also importantly, they can recognize state authority over land and water resources. One of the concerns um, the of Sackett was that they couldn't there wasn't a balance, and that it wasn't defined, and so that's where that comes from. That would be helpful. We have some other alternatives to amending the Clean Water Act. going back to that definition of a significant nexus standard, and also have a definition of the continuous connection instead of course, having, no offense to them, but non-technical people trying to figure this stuff out. Um, and Also, we would like to include rather than exclude ephemeral and intermittent waters. We've talked a lot about those, and they're clearly important. And there's probably much more than I had to say. Um, another Another alternative is the use of a more integrated method with scientific data on the hydrologic connection, and also encouraging state legislation that accounts for all aspects of connectivity and that supports water and wetlands functions. Um, and the last thing about is that these alternatives would address the clarity of scope, specificity, and scope of and authority that for the agency authority that is at the heart of the SACA decision that they felt that EPA went beyond where they were allowed, and also the add a focus, and also it would add a focus on scientific approach, which also was discussed in SACIT. And that would, give us a chance to move forward. And it would be not in through political, as at least a more balanced political process as compared to the what EPA is doing at this time in the current regime. So that is what I had to say, and I'm happy to turn this over to Mickey, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, Mickey, are you ready here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, tell us who you are a little bit too.
Yeah. Okay, I'm Mickey Croyle. I spent many years in the league in Cincinnati. I was born in Western Pennsylvania in the Appalachian Plateau and saw, as Gretchen did, the pollution by the steel mills and the wood and coal mining. And then when I was 11, I moved upstate New York. But prior to doing that, I used to go to work with my grandfather, who worked at the water treatment plant. And so I learned all about water treatment and how you got rid of flocculent material from when they were harvesting trees and stuff. And so it was pretty good I learned about, things that impacted water quality and whatnot. And then in New York, I got really involved in water because I needed to have a science project, and I decided to look at. We were having a lot of flooding. We had the canals and we were in the Finger Lakes area, and there was a lot of runoff from the vineyards, the grape harvest from the fertilizer. And so whenever there was rains, that would end up, mainly manure, would end up in the rivers and the creeks and the canals. And then you'd have a lot of stormwater, you'd have sewer going in as well. And so you would get a lot of algae growth and a lot of bacterial growth. So I did a bacterial characterization for my honors project in high school. And then when I was in college, I was in water ecology and microbiology. And so my honors project in biology was actually to look at Keuka Lake in connection with Cornell. And we characterized all the bacteria, and we did it like in the summer, we did it in the fall, we did it after a rainstorm and whatnot. And then we're able to actually come up with what was coming in and could prove that it was the nutrients from the fertilizer as well as the runoff from the sewers from stormwater. And then I got into environmental health and safety as well when I was working as a researcher. But anyhow, but I've had a long history with the league. In Cincinnati, I spent 6 years being on the Environmental Advisory Council and chair of the Water Committee that reported to the city council, the mayor, and the city manager on water issues of the city. And that was sort of an interesting 6-year period. And here in Cincinnati, St. Louis, I'm now on the Metropolitan Sewer District Rate Commission I'm the league delegate. But anyhow, program is the league's reason for being, and it's the basis for both of our education advocacy. League program consists of those governmental issues that league members choose for concerted study and action. It includes both adopted positions upon which action is taken and issues for study that will lead to a position and future action. The league program process begins with the selection and adoption of a study, continues with detailed study, discussion, and results in a position that permits action and change. Local, state, interleague organizations and national league, as well as program committees, can always use local, state, and national program positions to work on issues that reflect their community concerns. The league is a grassroots organization that uses program to provide us with an opportunity and the responsibility to add our voices and educate and act on environmental issues, including resource management, protection, pollution, control issues, land use, air quality, water quality, energy, and waste issues, using state, local, and national league positions with board approval. League program and positions guide the education of our members on environmental issues and events and encourages action with appropriate board approval, including participation at public hearings, call to action to write letters, social media posts, educating the public, and talking with our neighbors. It enables us to provide testimony to regulatory agencies, including the US EPA, state regulatory agencies, state legislatures, local, city, and county government as well. LWV US must approve all action at the national level, either contacting members of the US Congress or submitting testimony to national regulatory agencies such as the EPA. Under the current political environment, with the attacks on democracy and voting rights, the National League has been focused on empowering voters and defending democracy. The climate interest groups, of which I participate, were developed with 3 goals. The first was to provide local and state leagues with vetted, science-based, and curated information on key climate issues so local leagues can immediately advocate and league voices are consistent and informed. The second is to provide talking points on current topical issues that have been prepared by the CIG in collaboration with LWV US staff. They're currently working on data centers right now. And 3, to host webinars and other events on key issues to inform and motivate league action. The LWV US Climate Interest Group Steering Committee, of which I'm a member, used league positions to develop comments that LWV US submitted to the US EPA in opposition to both the endangerment finding reversal on October 16th and the greenhouse gas reporting plan elimination on November 1st. We completed today a statement regarding the narrowing definition of WOTUS, waters of the United States, that was submitted this morning to LWV US for edit and approval. LWV UMRR has drafted our own comments, as you have heard, with a focus on the greater impact that the revised definition of WOTUS has on the upper Mississippi environment and water quality. The steering committee was very impressed with our comments and congratulated us on getting them in and approved. Only with approval by LWV US can we act in the name of the league. These will be submitted, they were approved and they will be submitted to both the US EPA and the Army Corps. But we must remember that as individuals, we can always use our league advocacy, education, and position development to equip us to act as individuals, to provide our own comments as individuals. As individuals, we can submit comments to all levels of government and regulatory agencies. We can also educate our members and our neighbors. And that's very critical now with WOTUS. We have until January 5th to get comments in. Excuse me. And so I would encourage you to submit your own individual comments. You can use portions of our letter, our comments, and include your own personal comments if you've been, if you've had issues. And watch out for other action alerts from UMR. Sorry. That's it.
Okay, so thank you, Mickey. I'm going to talk a little bit more here too about how to make comments, so I'll cover that in just a sec. But I want to say that, those of us here talking tonight, we have sewage in our veins from a long time ago. But the rest of the people here, if you don't have sewage, you have clean water. You have things you care about. Looking at the names on this meeting, I recognize a lot of people that are here today. And you guys live in places that have beautiful water resources that could be affected by this. And so now is the time that you need to write those letters and get them in and put yourself on the map for this. I'm going to share my screen here and show you a thing about how to make comments. So we want people to comment on the proposed rule, and you can do that. The EPA or the Trump administration actually has some new rules on how they review comments. And so they want people to write personal emails, so not just sign on a letter to say, yes, I agree with this. They want something that's personal to you. They're going to be looking for unique letters, something unique to you and your area. So, this is where we share these stories, things that matter to you. Say, I live on this federally protected wetland, and it has been protected for all this time, and I see these wonderful animals, and I see the impacts that it has on flooding, and I do not want to see this lost. So you say those things in that letter. Use your own words. You can take our letter. I'll show you where to find our letter, and you can certainly use talking points from there, but if you put it into your own words, then it's unique, and it forces EPA to have to respond to your letter. And so that's what you want to do, is to make them notice your letter and not just put a check mark, same letter. No, these are unique thoughts and they all have to be addressed. And so the comment deadline is January 5th, so do it now. Sorry, that got covered up there. The link is on our blog post. So we have a blog, LWVUMRR/blog. So if you go to that, and I'll show you in just a sec, we have the link there, and I'll show you that. And then you can also write as an individual, not as league, to your congressional representatives. So I, for example, would say, Congressman Emmer, I am very concerned about this. This is the letter that I have written to EPA, and I am telling it to you as well. So those are the things you can do. And I'll unshare this, and I'll share the other thing here. Hang on. Oh, I'm in the wrong place. So I'll keep talking while I find it. So anyhow, we are working on submitting comments. What Mickey didn't say, but I'll say, I can't find it, is that we are also going to be soliciting our state leagues to comment as well. And so if the state leagues, rather than write their own comment, to sign on to our letter, because LWV US gave permission to the states to do it. I know that Missouri is interested in doing it, in Wisconsin. I'm going to ask Minnesota. We can ask our states to also sign on to this and give it that much more strength to say that all of us here care about this. So that's the other thing that we're working on here. And now I will share this. So on the LWUMRR webpage, where's that? There it is. We have a blog. So you go to our home page. You can see there it says, you come up on the home page when you put in lwvumrr.org. And you click on blog, it'll bring you to this page. And I have this post here on how to comment on the proposed definition. So when you come back to this bit about the webinar will say watch the webinar here instead of register. And here's the proposed rule. You can read the rule here where it says proposed rule. So if you click on that, it'll take you to the proposed rule. And the comment site is here. And when you go to the comment site, it's super simple. You just write a comment, you can type your comment there, you can attach files if you have pictures, if you have other kind of documents. You put in your personal information, and then you hit I'm not a robot, and you go. They do have some guidelines here, and these are actually very good to read. I summarized them very briefly in what I put there, but you can read those, and that's helpful. I again summarized those same things and some other thoughts. If you're looking for a specific water body, the Natural Resources Defense Council put together this map here. It takes too long to load, so I'm not going to show it, but it basically, you can look up your area and look at all the federally protected wetlands in your area and talk about that. So that's a great resource too. So those are the things that you can do. Like I said, it's on the blog. Just cruise over to the blog and take a gander at it and get it done, because it's due on January 5th. We will be happy to talk to anyone who wants to talk about this, so reach out to us. The email address here, you probably have it because we've been writing to you. It's lwvumrr@lwvmn.org. And with that, I think we'll take some questions, unless there's something somebody else wants to say.
Yeah, I want to add a comment.
You go.
Saturday night, we were at the St. Louis Camera Club Christmas event, and the winner of the short camera expose, or whatever you call it, did one on the Arctic short-eared owl that comes down to Missouri in the winter time to winter. And he had these beautiful pictures. And afterwards, I was talking with him about WOTUS and that he should submit comments because he's noticed a decrease in the number of owls. And then the president of the club is actually my former boss at the Environmental Health and Safety Division of the Washington University in St. Louis. Also encouraged him to do, but he had some beautiful pictures that he's going to post to the EPA site, which I think will go.
And by sending in comments about how much this means to people, I think that'll really make a difference. Well, I don't know if they can make a difference, but at least we'll know that we've done what we can do. So that's something. So the first question we had, and please put your questions in the chat here, and we'll pull them up. I'll ask the first question, and I'm going to ask it of Sheila. I don't know if you read it in advance. If intrastate waters are excluded from the Clean Water Act, does that mean any water between two states or different? You want to handle that?
Yeah. So I can I guess everybody can read it, but I'll read off the question. If interstate waters are excluded from the Clean Water Act, does that mean any river between two states that flows at different points through two states? What does that mean? Or does it mean that the rivers that are only in one state are excluded? No. If the river is a continuously flowing permanent river and not an intermittent river or ephemeral stream, they are jurisdictional, meaning that they meet the definition of WOTUS. And especially and even what they're saying is they just previously in the Clean Water Act, I believe that all interstate waters were under the jurisdiction of the Clean Water Act. All they said was all interstate waters. Now they're specifying that they have to be jurisdictional, meaning that they meet the definition of WOTUS with continuous flow.
Yeah, I have a comment too. I don't see any questions right now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about groundwater. Groundwater is water under the ground, and groundwater is actually what connects these unconnected wetlands to streams and things like that. The Clean Water Act does not address groundwater. Groundwater is absolutely critical. And I think that that's something too that we commented on in our comments, and something that people can say. If you're commenting, say, I have a private well. I'm very concerned about groundwater. I know that the groundwater that comes out of this feeds this stream. It's a spring-fed stream. We need that groundwater protected, and it's fed by the wetlands upstream. So those are the kinds of things that you can put into the letters. Is there anything else anybody else wants to say about that?
I wanted to share one other thing that people might want to think about as far as taking action and participating. a lot of you belong to other organizations like Trouts Unlimited or conservation voters or wetland groups. And if you Google some of your favorite organizations, you're going to find that they have letters already created on their websites. And all you have to do is put in your zip code, and it will bring up who your legislators are, and there'll be a sample letter there, and all you have to do is add your own personal input. And I've seen personally at least 9 of them that float through my computer. And I think if you think about your favorite organizations that are oriented to water quality, that you can even find some of these things already prepared and already ready to go.
Okay,
Well,
so
this
we're
is-
going to wrap it up then. Thank you very much. The recording, I'll push the recording out to everybody that registered, and also we'll put it on the website and try to do some other ways to get it out to people here in the last few waning days of the year. So thank you all, and we'll call it quits.